Hi there, welcome to the Apatros review. I'm your host, Mile Sipka, and I'll take you through many of the DVDs, Blu-rays, videos, and games in my collection. Now, before I start my first review, I must warn you that while this show is mainly a review about certain media that interests me, like on the science fiction, action, horror variety, there are things I won't talk about. For example, I won't talk about politics. I'm not going down that rat hole. And just for people out there, there are some people who have an agenda who like to say nasty things about people on social media, and just please be respectful to other people. Now, anyway, this first film I'm going to review for this episode is Bloodrayne, which is the Uwe Boll cult film from the early 2000s. Now, if you've lived from about if you were around about 20 years ago, you will have heard of Uwe Boll, who is a guy who used to make really bad video game adaptations. Now, of course, most people tend to hate him. They think he's the worst director out there, but personally, I don't believe that. Because he's not really that bad a director. Just the problem is he has really bad scripts that works with. For Bloodrayne, the version I'm reviewing is of the director's cut. Originally in Australia, and and the vast majority of the discs we'll review here of the Australian discs. Sometimes I'll review foreign discs, but anyway. The film was originally released in Australia for the rental market, the original theatrical version by 20th Century Fox. That version was out of print by the time they released a director's cut, which is the version I have seen. And that disc is commonly available like from bargain basement shops if you can track it down. The original rental disc, the theatrical version, didn't have any extras, while the director's cut had plenty of extras. Actually, a direct port of the American disc. Anyway, Uwe Boll's negative. Alright, firstly, Bloodrayne was made in 2005 by Uwe Boll. It was written by Guinevere Turner. It was based on the Majesco video game, produced by Uwe Boll, Daniel Clark, and Sean Williamson. It stars Kristanna Loken, the original female Terminator, as Rain, Michael Madsen, Matt Davis, Michelle Rodriguez, Ben Kingsley, Ben Kingsley, Will Sanderson, Meatloaf, and Udo Kier. It's got quite a list. Anyway, Uwe Boll's negative reputation with the video game crowd continued to take a massive battering with the likes of Bloodrayne, which is a third of his spectacular subpar video game adaptations, and one of his very worst. Although curiously, this ended up being Boll's biggest franchise, of sorts, with two sequels. Although Boll had always wanted to spin out the Bloodrayne franchise into a trilogy. Now, the story is Europe in the Dark Ages. Rain, a female vampire-human hybrid, what is known as a Damphia in the franchise, finally has enough of life in the circus troupe that has kept her prisoner since childhood and makes a breakout. Determined to make her vampire father, Kagan, the mighty king of the vampires, pay for raping her human mother and killing her when Rain was just a child, Rain sets out to find a trio of vampire talismans, which when combined and absorbed into the body of the vampire who seeks them, will make them immune to sunlight, water, and the crucifix. As she is already part human, Rain already has immunity to crosses, but is still vulnerable to sunlight or water. Unaware that every move has been tracked by Kagan's spies, Rain manages to locate the first talisman hidden inside a monastery. Sneaking inside, she is trapped inside a room filled with water, but after absorbing the talisman, an eye, she is no longer troubled by water. As Kagan's best warrior, the human Domesty, is sent after her, Rain teams up with three members of the Brimstone Society, an ancient order of vampire hunters, to perfect her combat techniques and take the fight right up to Kagan himself. And by the way, this is a rainy day. It's raining outside, so if the audio sounds a little weird, that's because it's raining. Now, by all accounts, the production of Bloodrayne was beset with problems. The script was actually a rough draft written by Canadian lesbian actress and writer Guinevere Turner, who was unaware that after the script was given to Boll, he and the actors improvised much of the draft's details on the set, which would account for some of the naff dialogue and poorly constructed storyline. Star Michael Madsen kept himself occupied by staying impeccably drunk throughout the production. Boll had a bright idea to save on costs for the scene in Leonid's lair by hiring Romanian prostitutes. Apparently, the local actresses were too expensive. And Cristiano Loca and Michelle Rodriguez had an affair. That's what's in YouTube. The result was an abomination of a film. Madsen called it as a poor film, but added that he enjoyed working with football and would do so again if need be. And by the way, most actors actually enjoy working with football. He's a good director for actors. Anyway, this film became one of Ball's worst ever projects, but still got talked about for a long time and kept his reputation for mangling video game franchises active. Personally, I never liked the idea of Bowles setting the first film in the franchise as a prequel to the actual source video game. If you're making a film based on a video game, you should respect the canon of the game and make the film as close as you can to that canon. But I'm not exactly a Bowl hater. House of the Dead was an idiotic film, more idiotic than the likes of Resident Evil, but at least it moved fast and had an insane amount of action to deviate from the ridiculous plot. And some of Bowles' non-video game-based films, namely the serial killer thrillers that Bowl tends to churn out on dull days, like Seed and Sanctimony, to name but two productions, tend to be bleak and pessimistic enough to be interesting. Bowles' only major failing is that he doesn't make too much of an effort to get the best writers for his scripts. Mark A. Altman's stupid script for House of the Dead was a classic example of the adage of not hiring Star Trek uber nerds to write your scripts for you. And although Guinevere Turner actually has some talent in horror scripting, just check out American Psycho if you doubt this, but she never had enough time to complete the first draft, or before Ball acquired it. The only other filmmakers who tend to rush for their roids are the good folk at the Asylum. They have a policy of rushing their productions from initial concept to the final product in under a month, but Ball has considerable talent, unlike the Asylum's in-house cadre of hacks. As for the acting, the main cast are pretty mediocre. As Rain, Christina Loken plays a role far too seriously to be effective. She is a good actress and can have a little fun if need be, but here she really loses contact with the plot by being too stiff with her performance. Of the rest of the cast, Ben Kingsley is the most eyebrow-raising. This guy has made sure that his one stellar reputation, and by the way, he won an Oscar for Gandhi back in the 1980s, and that was a big film at the time, got damn good thrashing with a performance that makes him look like a bad joke. Still, if you want unintentional humor value, just watch him sinking his teeth into a human girl and engage in sword-fighting look. His stiff as a statue expressions providing much-needed chuckles from the viewer. In all, this is best served with a beer and pizza and improvised Mystery Science Theater 3000 commentary from you and your friends on night 10. The sequels are far better than this. Now, as for the DVD, I mentioned that it was released in two versions around the world, and mainly here in Australia, the theatrical version was released on a rental-only DVD by 20th Century Fox, which had no extras. The menu design was a little clunky, like they didn't really care much about the DVD. Picture quality was okay. Then, uh, then the director's cut came out. First, there were bootleg copies of the director's cut available from flea markets and cheap DVD sellers. Then it was replaced by the same disc was re-released properly by 20th Century Fox and Payless Entertainment. Payless was for from the beginning of the Australian DVD age up until a few years ago was the leader in the cheap budget discs. That was what it was. Now, now the disc was I no longer have a disc with me. I made a copy of it and moved on. The disc had a bit of a clunky menu design, like the original. What happens is if you don't treat the disc right, like if you're not careful with what button you press, it'll bite you like a vampire. Yeah, like if you try to fast forward through the beginning, you know, how some people when the disc starts up they fast forward through the credits and stuff, the logos and stuff. Well, what happened here is if you do that, you're gonna end up accidentally pressing all the extras that come up. So you just let the menu come by itself, and then you can go from there. Now the quality is okay. I mean, I'll give the film a D, which is in my book a 1 out of 5 or a 2 out of 10. I'll explain my ratings as I go along progressively. I don't do Fs. My scores range from D minus, which is a half out of 5 or 1 out of 10, to an A plus, which is a 5 out of 5 or a 10 out of 10. I don't do Fs because I do put some of these reviews on the IMDb and I need to be lenient. I don't do C minus or B minus, so it kind of makes sense. But anyway, the disc itself, the picture quality was okay. It wasn't perfect, but it was decent. And by the way, if you're watching the early parts of Bloodrayne, you'll notice that in the scene where the circus demonstrates Rain's powers, there's a guy wearing a wristwatch, a Bond wristwatch, in the crowd, which is Uwe Boll himself. So you can find him pretty easily. I mean, seriously, what kind of idiot wears a wristwatch in the Dark Ages? Those things weren't invented then. So now the disc is probably out of print. Both versions of both discs are print. So if you can find, but I think it's a little bit easier to find director's cut out there. Anyway, that's it for this review. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be reviewing plenty more films where that came from. That's it.